The King of UMUALA, Episode 3. The chief priest stood before the king and his council of chiefs, his voice echoing through the grand hall as he chanted some more incantations that seemed to reverberate through the very walls of the palace. The air was thick with anticipation as the priest continued his ritual, his eyes closed in deep concentration as he sought the guidance of the gods. But how can this be? Gods of our land, what can this mean? What level of confusion is this? Is the spoken prince of this generation? The chief priest murmured, encircling the cowries and other items he'd thrown on the floor. Wise one, please speak to us. Please tell us what is going on. One of the chiefs said anxiously. Yes, please tell us what the gods are saying, another chief said with a concerned look on his face. But the chief priest continued to mutter inaudible things to himself, asking what the gods were trying to say. You will tell us what the gods have said at once, wise one, the king ordered, his voice booming impatiently in the palace. Yet the chief priest remained silent, shutting his eyes in deep meditation as his hands continued to gesticulate his confusion. After what seemed like an eternity, the priest finally opened his eyes and spoke in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of the heavens themselves. Your Majesty, the gods have spoken, he intoned, his words causing a hush to fall over the assembled court. They say that only the lost prince can heal the princess. Your Majesty, the gods insist that only the prince can heal the princess, for only he knows what must be done to the injured spot, the chief priest said. Confusion rippled through the room, for the king had only a daughter and no son to speak of. The council of chiefs murmured amongst themselves, trying to make sense of the cryptic message from the gods. But we have no prince. The kingdom has but a princess, the heir to the throne. What prince are you talking about, wise one? The king asked, his voice filled with disbelief. The chief priest merely shook his head, his expression inscrutable. I have asked the gods to speak in a clearer tone, to tell us exactly what this means. But they have only one message, that I inform the king and the kingdom that until the prince is brought before the princess, in his royalty, the princess will not recover. The gods demand that the king finds the prince and restore his royalty, but they have refused to speak beyond that, he said, his tone final. With a bow, he turned to leave the palace, but not before he turned back to the king. You must find the prince and restore his royalty before it's too late. The gods told me about the lost prince and how he's destined to restore UMUALA's glory. They foretold about his glory and the exploits he will do in his lifetime. But I never imagined that this great prince is of our lifetime. Find him, find the prince, and restore his royalty before things go irredeemably wrong, he said, his words resonating with a sense of urgency. As the chief priest departed, leaving a sense of mystery and urgency in his wake, the king and his council of chiefs were left to ponder the meaning of the god's message. But how can there be a prince when we have no knowledge of one? One of the chiefs asked, his brow furrowed in thought. Exactly my worry. Are the gods trying to punish us? How can they ask us to find a non-existent prince at a time like this, when the heir to the throne of UMUALA is at the verge of leaving us? Another chief complained worriedly. We must search for answers. We will send for Agwo, the priest of X Shrine. He is famed for his cordial relationship with the gods, and I know the gods will speak expressly to him and give us a solution. The fate of the princess rests in our hands, and we must uncover the truth behind the god's message. The king declared with an air of finality. The next day, Agwo, the chief priest of Ike Shrine, was sitting in the palace floor, looking at his divination items on the floor with a deep frown. Your Majesty, the gods are angry. You have mistreated the next king of UMUALA and failed to give him what is due him. He is the only hope for the princess and must be restored to his royal status, because only then can he save the princess from dying. Agwo said, Tell me, wise one, can the kingdom have a prince who isn't blood related to the king? From the times of my ancestors, only a male child born of the king is named a prince. I have but a daughter, and so the kingdom doesn't have a prince. Where are the gods seeing this prince that I have supposedly mistreated? The king asked. My king, the gods speak not of a prince different from the one they blessed you with. For like you said, only a son born of the royal family can be considered a prince. They have tasked you to fetch your son and restore his royalty. And yes, your majesty, the gods have said that the prince is right where you can find him, only if you look within. The gods are wise. Agwo said, made some dramatic dances, and stormed off the palace, screaming, "Restore the prince." And so the king and his council of chiefs began to brainstorm, their minds racing as they tried to unravel the mystery of the prince who was said to hold the key to the princess's healing. Why would the gods speak of a prince that no longer existed, one that was said to have died as soon as he was born? The questions swirled in their minds, a puzzle that seemed to have no easy solution. But one thing was clear: they would stop at nothing to find the prince and unlock the secrets that lay hidden in the gods' enigmatic message. Your Majesty, Agwo's divination is in clear harmony with the kingdom's chief priests. As it stands, it is already established that the royal household has a prince that we're not aware of. Agwo has further said that this said prince is within your reach, and you will easily find him, if only you look hard. So, Your Majesty, please think hard. Try to remember if you have had an encounter with any maiden who could have borne you a son without your knowledge, the Prime Minister of the kingdom said fearlessly. Some chiefs gasped at his audacity, but 2 or more chiefs supported him, saying the king needed to save the kingdom from the calamity that can befall them for naming his daughter the heir to the throne when he had a son born of his loins. That day, as the sun beat down harshly on the vast kingdom of UMUALA, casting shadows against the mud-brick walls of the royal palace, King Namdi, a powerful ruler known for his wisdom and strength, sat in his throne room surrounded by his council of chiefs, looking totally helpless. After some moments of silence, he dismissed them all, needing to be alone to ponder the cryptic words of the chief priest. His mind raced as he tried to recall any maiden he had been with in his younger days, one who could have birthed the unknown son the chief priest spoke of. A sudden jolt of recognition struck King Namdi, as memories flooded back of a beautiful maiden he had once been enamored with. She had indeed borne a son he had later imprisoned in the palace for committing unspeakable crimes against the community. Hurriedly, he summoned his trusted prime minister and confidant, Okori, to his side. "I need you to bring me the young man who has been imprisoned all these years for stealing from the royal barn. I suspect he may be the lost prince, the son I never knew I had," the king said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Your Majesty, are you talking about Dyke, Chinaza's son? I hope not, Your Majesty. I hope you're talking about someone else, because it surely can't be the same Dyke that I know. Are you saying you were at any time entangled with Chinaza?" Okori asked the king. The king looked down in shame momentarily, embarrassed by the fact that he had to own up to having a secret affair with Chinaza. He told his friend and confidant about his secret affair with Chinaza and how he left her for good when he met his late wife and fell in love with her. "Oh well, as bad as it is, we will have to do the needful if her son is indeed your son. A woman who has raised a son with unknown paternity all these years isn't exactly who one should be associated with, but the gods alone know why they let certain things happen," Okori advised the king. The prime minister urged him to speak to the maiden, the boy's mother, to determine the truth of his parentage before he went public with the information. King Namdi nodded in agreement, and he sent for Chinaza to speak with her about his suspicion that her son could be his. But to his dismay, she confessed that she had been with not only him, but 2 other men during that time, so she couldn't tell for sure if Dyke was his son or not. Enraged yet conflicted, King Namdi struggled to comprehend how a woman of such beauty and grace could harbor such duplicity. Nevertheless, he chose to acknowledge the young man as his own, for the blood that ran through his veins bore the royal lineage, or so he thought. However, as word spread of the young man's potential royal heritage, his arrogance grew, and he began to mistreat his fellow inmates in the prison, demanding they revere him as the incoming king. But Uchenna was a bone in Dyke's neck, because he stood against the arrogant prince and his tyrannical attitude in the prison. "I will not bow to a pretender such as you. Your arrogance has so badly ruined your sense of reasoning that you have so quickly forgotten that we have all been here for each other before this hope of royalty came for you." And if you ask me, Dyke, royalty can't be found in someone like you. You will never be seen as a prince through my eyes, because I know that the true king will be revealed in due time, Uchenna declared boldly. The tension in the prison mounted as Deke made threats of retribution, vowing to deal with Uchenna once he ascended the throne. And as the sun set over the kingdom, casting a warm glow over the land, the fate of the throne hung precariously in the balance, awaiting the revelation of the true heir to the ancient lineage of Igbo royalty. In the opulent throne room of the palace, King Nnamdi stood before his assembled council of chiefs the next day, his brow furrowed in deep contemplation. "Fetch Dyke from the prison," he commanded his men, anticipation and anxiety mingling in his voice. As Dyke was brought before him, the once imprisoned man stood tall and defiant, arrogance dripping from every pore as he addressed the king and his chiefs. "You denied me my birthright as a prince, keeping me locked away while I should have been enjoying the privileges of royalty." Dyke berated, his words laced with bitterness and resentment. King Nnamdi's heart ached for the young man, whom he had unknowingly neglected. "I apologize for the pain you have endured, my son. I vow to make amends and ensure you are honored as a prince from this day forth." The king promised, his voice filled with sincerity and regret. He asked that Dyke be clothed and adorned in an attire that befitted his royal status, and the royal servants quickly did as the king had instructed. Dyke, now adorned in regal attire and seated beside the king, was presented with a daunting task. The princess lay gravely ill, and the chief priest insisted that only the prince possessed the power to heal her. The chief priest entered the palace just as Dyke was taking a seat beside the king, and his eyes bore a look of disapproval when they fell upon Dyke. "What is this, your majesty? Why do you trouble the princess when I have already informed you that the gods have spoken about the prince as the only one who can heal her?" the chief priest asked. But Dyke, emboldened by his newfound status, rudely hushed the chief priest, declaring he knew what needed to be done to heal the princess, but first required permission to mete out punishment on an offender. The chief priest insisted that only the true prince could save the princess, causing a ripple of confusion and tension to engulf the throne room. Infuriated by the chief priest's assertions, King Nnamdi lashed out in anger. "Why do you seek to sow discord and confusion in my kingdom?" "Silence," he commanded, refusing to let the chief priest speak any further. Turning to Dyke, the king granted him permission to exact his desired punishment before healing the princess. Dyke wasted no time, demanding the presence of Uchenna, the only man who had stood against him after the news of his royal affinity reached the prison to be brought before him. "I, Dyke, the Prince of UMUALA, will heal the princess today because last night the gods showed me what must be done to heal the princess. But before then, I need to punish this arrogant and disrespectful commoner," he declared proudly, beating his chest as he spoke. "Beware, King Nnamdi. Beware lest you incur the wrath of the gods. This charlatan is anything but the lost prince." The chef priest chanted, his brows knotted in anger. The king ignored the chief priest, asking the palace guards to bring Uchenna just as the prince had commanded. "Gods of our land, you know that I do not have a hand in this, and I refuse to be a witness to the beginning of an era of insanity," the chief priest said and made to leave, but Dyke compelled the chief priest to stand right where he was. The king asked the guards to restrain the chief priest from leaving the palace, and the chief priest was laughing at their folly, asking how they imagined they could compel him to stay in a place he didn't want to. But just before he placed his hand into his sling bag to pull out a potent charm, Uchenna was dragged into the open courtyard, and something struck the priest's heart. As soon as Uchenna appeared in the palace courtyard, the chief priest's voice boomed, proclaiming Uchenna as the true prince and thanking the gods for making him see the great prince they spoke about. "Behold the true prince of UMUALA Kingdom. Thank you, gods of our land. Thank you, my ancestors, for letting me witness this great day. Welcome, great and noble prince of our great kingdom. The gods spoke about your return to the palace, but I never imagined that I'd be alive to see you come back to the palace." The chief priest chanted excitedly before he zoomed out of the palace, leaving a trail of confusion. Why has the chief priest declared Uchenna the prince when his late parents have no biological connection with the royal household? Is the chief priest possibly getting back at Dyke for his arrogance? Is he just trying to save Uchenna from the terrible punishment Dyke planned for him? How will the true prince be identified now that the chief priest has denounced Dyke as the prince? Find out in the next episode. Subscribe to this channel to get notified when I post the next episode. Do not forget to leave a comment to tell us what you think about this story. See you real soon.